Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you, and this time we're talking episode 1 of season 3 of Supergirl called Girl of Steel. So Supergirl is back. I've very much been looking forward to this new season, and I think it gets things off to a pretty decent start. Um, so let's just kind of get right into things. First things first, I kind of like this whole situation we have with Kara, where she's just so busted up about what's happened with Mon-El and the Daxamite invasion, that she's just basically thrown herself into being Supergirl, totally neglecting Kara Danvers. I mean, this is something we've even seen from Superman before, and it's a very familiar path for superheroes who've suffered a major loss, that they just throw themselves into their superhero identity and even kind of more or less say, like, the person who I'm supposed to be outside of the costume doesn't really matter. This is what's important. And it's really just a coping mechanism. And while it's a little bit of a worn trope, a worn path, it's still an interesting one, and under the circumstances, not an unreasonable reaction. But we do see that this is concerning to the people around Kara. I mean, she doesn't even acknowledge the kid that thanks her, and we've always seen that Kara is really enjoys when she can sort of have a little moment to sort of say hi to a kid or something like that. It obviously gives her a great deal of joy. Here she barely even she doesn't even really even look at the kid's face. She's cold to her friends. I mean, she basically more or less blows Alex off. And I mean, she even sort of vaguely hints that sort of like a lot of really important things, like, the whole wedding situation, are things like okay, yeah, maybe if I have time. I mean, that's not really a good place for Kara to be. And of course, I do like that she sort of comes around by the end. But I mean, it was getting pretty crazy there. I mean, she even more or less quit her job just to focus on being Kara. I mean, to focus on being Supergirl. That sort of tunnel vision is extraordinarily destructive. Um, and I am glad that the people around her understand that this is her way of dealing with a really bad situation. Nobody's taking this too personally. Everybody knows that she's really just not thinking clearly, and nicely is a reasonably mature adult about it. When Kara finally gets her head back, out of her butt, she is pretty sorry for what she's done. So that's good. I do like situations where people understand what's going on with other people and are willing to cut them some slack under understandable circumstances. And when people make mistakes, the people around them are willing to be mature adults about it. It doesn't feel like anybody is being stupid for the sake of drama here. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, one of the big things we have is this episode is we're introduced to the character of Morgan Edge. I think we had Morgan Edge, I think, on like the old Lois and Clark show. He turned up on Smallville. He's kind of a reoccurring sort of character in the Superman mythos. He's been sort of played various ways: corrupt businessman, crime boss. But what I really love here is they got him to be played by Adrian Pazdur, who, of course, most of us know best from Heroes from some time back. But he's a really, really great actor. And interestingly enough, he's not new to superhero stuff. He's actually done the voice of Iron Man, Tony Stark, in a lot of animated projects for Marvel. So basically, we're getting Supergirl versus Iron Man, which is cool on multiple levels. And if you've ever seen any of that stuff with Pazdur as Iron Man, do check it out. He was a very inspired choice for the voice of Tony Stark. He absolutely sells it wonderfully. He really gets the character of Tony Stark. And I mean, he does a really great job with Morgan Edge here. I mean, you really hate this guy. I mean, he just comes off as like such an obnoxious, smug, self-important, pompous creep, and it's great. And having Lena take the wind out of his sails by buying Catco out from under him, that not only gives her a nice little moment, but it also sort of serves to set up that really nice bit at the end where Supergirl sort of turns his threat that he was making to Lena. Is like, now you've got my full attention. Well, Morgan kind of forgot that, there's always a bigger fish out there. and having the full attention of a superpowered alien who, is pretty tight with the person you were just threatening, that could be problematic. Um, and I also kind of like how her whole thing of just dumping him on that cargo ship, she doesn't really have to worry about consequences for that because he'd have to admit that he got made to look like a punk to actually do anything about it, at least in public. Now, sure, behind the scenes, Edge is not going to let this stand and is going to start trying to deal with the situation. And Morgan Edge is not somebody to be taken lightly. But again, I do like that how Kara has shown that, hey, I was in kind of a bad place, but now I've got my head screwed on straight. I'm still Supergirl. I'm more experienced than ever, and bring it on. I mean, cool, great. Let's see. I don't really have anything particular to say about Win this episode. He did have some nice moments showing that he's a man with serious skills, and I like that John took the time to compliment him briefly. So not much going on with Win there, but it was nice to see him. I definitely like Jimmy kind of getting on Kara's case about her behavior. And one thing I will say though is that in his defense, Morgan Edge did make a fair point that Catco has been very obviously biased in its opinions regarding aliens and in particular Supergirl. Now, some people out there have this idea that fair and balanced and equal time for us in terms of various views, it basically comes down to, if you write a story praising or in favor of something from this side of the political aisle, then to balance it out, you have to write a story praising or supporting something from the opposite side of the political aisle. And it just turns into some sort of gigantic numbers game. You're supposed to always be trying to keep everything at zero, right? One story, bad story. I mean, realistically, is this actually sound like something that's viable in the real world? There's somebody saying okay, so we've done some pro stories about this. Okay, we need some negative stories about this. And while, of course, a mixture of opinions is extraordinarily important, especially in this day and age, where despite the plethora of opinions and information out there, because of just the way people live their lives, it's easier than ever to live in a gigantic echo chamber if that's what you really want. But I've never really believed in the idea that, if you've written a story in favor of something that liberals like, then you need to write a story in favor of something that conservatives like, or whatever, that you really constantly need to be trying for that zero, for that, no moving one way or the other. I think what really counts as fair and balanced in the realistic 21st century isn't so much that, you're kind of keeping this impossible dream of some sort of fantasy equilibrium. It's really more that you are upfront with your opinions. You are clear that this is what you believe, and that you're not going to basically try and trick people. You're not going to try and employ what my high school journalism teacher called weasel words. You're not going to try and manipulate people into believing what you say or agreeing with your opinions. You're going to present them with facts, and you're going to be upfront with where you are coming with these facts. It's hey, I come into the situation believing this. Here's this information, but if you're doing the good job with journalism, you're okay, here's this information. Everything is true. I can support all of this, and you do acknowledge any real weaknesses with your ideas. So I think it's really not so much, some balance that only exists in, fantasy land. It's more just simply about being honest with where you're coming from, with what ideas and what viewpoint you are trying to promote, so that people can make that informed decision of whether or not they really want to listen to what you have to say. I think if you're very just real with people, if you're hey, I come from this point of view, this is what I believe, now let me give you some information about this, and you're honest about it, then I think rational people will at least probably consider it. Now, sure, there's always going to be the people who just want to hear what they want to hear. You know, I know what I know. Don't confuse me with facts. Kind of people. We're always going to have those people. But I think it's far worse to sort of pretend that you are genuinely 100% objective when you blatantly are not. And we're just going to leave it at that. So, yeah. Let's see. Good action stuff this episode. Really liked the stuff with the submarine. That was nicely done. And that whole thing with Supergirl being knocked out in the ocean, that actually kind of reminded me of the thing from the Superman miniseries, American Alien, where and it takes place in an alternate reality where Superman is less powerful than he is traditionally portrayed, and he gets knocked for a loop into the ocean, and he almost drowns. And like he manages to get back to get onto a boat, and he's like, "Oh my God, I didn't even realize it was possible for me to drown." I was kind of wondering if we might have a moment like that. I mean, it would just be so cool for Kara to have this moment where she's like, "Oh my God, I almost drowned. I didn't even know I could drown." But it didn't work out that way. Let's see. They brought on the character of Bloodsport, who's a character I know a little bit about, but there have been a couple of different versions of Bloodsport. The only one I can ever really remember reading stories about was, ironically enough, of an interpretation of the character. I think it was the second one, who was actually a white supremacist. I mean, he like specifically was going around Metropolis targeting minorities. And there was this one scene where he like stumbles across like an interracial couple and just mows them down. He's like so offended that there was like a white girl who was like married to a black guy. It's like, I mean, he, if I remember correctly, he only ended up getting killed, and sort of like, well, good riddance to that guy. But still, though under the circumstances with what's going on in America today, it sort of seems both unfortunately topical and maybe just hitting a little too close to home for some people. So yeah. Let's see. We're also introduced to this lady. I think oh crap! I forgot what her name was. Well, anyway, she's obviously going to be an important character from the alien spaceship we see in the harbor. It's sort of implied she might be a Kryptonian. Why do Kryptonian spaceships keep ending up in National City? I mean, seriously, why that specific place? Oh yeah. Can't forget about that really great scene between Alex and John. That was, I found, to be very, very moving. And it really was, I think, one of the nicest moments we've seen in their relationship. That really very much surrogate father-daughter relationship. And her discussing the situation with her actual father, which I thought was very nicely done. That was really extremely moving. So yeah, points to the people behind Supergirl for really knocking that scene out of the park. I loved it. Let's see, what else? No, I think that kind of covers everything that I have to say about this episode. So in terms of coming back from a hiatus for new season and setting things up, this episode of Supergirl does a really nice job of it. Wasn't as strong as some of the ones from the other CW shows. Like I thought Arrow handled that quite. I think Arrow was extremely strong. Flash was pretty good. I wasn't so thrilled with the Legends of Tomorrow opening, but nonetheless, this was still a really, really solid episode, and I'm definitely looking forward to season 3 of Supergirl. I've heard a little bit about what's going on in terms of casting, some of the characters we're going to be bringing on in the future. There's one character in particular. I don't want to talk about her, but if the word Legion means anything to you and you've been paying attention to the Supergirl casting news, you know who I'm talking about, and I am really excited about this character and all the things and the implications that come with her and the Supergirl mythos, and I'm really hoping this is everything I hope it's going to be. But I'm going to call it here, guys. As always, please comment, rate, subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Please also join me on Tumblr as well at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.